Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you're doing well, and we're just going to get started in a minute and a half pretty much, so it's all going good today so far. So let's just get this meeting in, and we're good to go for the rest of the day. Hey there, Gary. Hey, Haley. Jose, good to see you. Hey, Cameron. Andrea, good to see you. I hope you guys haven't been too affected by the fires and everything. Heard that they're kind of dying down though, so that's good. Hey, Ron. That's good, Andrea. Black Friday shopping, definitely yes. Every year, gotta get something. I don't know if I'll be doing it in a cyber way this year, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna get some stuff. I want to get a new watch. That's one thing. This watch is a Garmin watch. Like I think I've mentioned before, it's a fitness watch, but it's getting old. The rubber grommet that holds the strap on has come off. So when I go running, you know, I have to like get a twisty to attach it. That's messed up. That's not cool. I mean, I actually have some nice metallic watches and stuff, but I like wearing this one because it tracks all my health fitness data and stuff. So I'm going to get a new top-of-the-line Garmin watch, but I've been kind of waiting to buy it. So just since you asked, yes, I have a couple purchases in mind, and I also want the PS5. But all right, thanks again, everybody, for being here. Let me begin the meeting by just recapping the last lecture. I know there was a couple of comments at the end that maybe got cut off or left off because there was just some small connection issues towards the tail end of the lecture. I went back and I looked at the tape and I saw that we did get most of it, but maybe the last 10 minutes or so. When I switched to Zoom, you know, anybody that actually attended, you still were able to check in on the notes at the end because we switched platforms pretty much. But I still want to recap because maybe we lost a few people at the end. So let's go back over the main material that we've discussed in the last previous meetings. So we're now on this topic of epistemology, another major topic in philosophy, which is all about knowledge and what constitutes knowledge. What's the definition of knowledge? This starts by taking us all the way back to ancient Greece and the writings of Plato and the teachings of his teacher Socrates. So I told you a little bit about Socrates and Plato, the life and death and trial of Socrates. And well, one of the dialogues that Plato wrote where Socrates is featured is called the Meno. And in the Meno, Socrates tries to describe the definition of knowledge. So who could just tell me quickly what is knowledge? Let's just set that clearly down on the chat one more time. There are three criteria, three conditions, and they say that knowledge was a justified true belief. Yes, JTB for short, a justified true belief. A belief, something that you think is true, but then it actually is true, so it matches reality. The statement matches reality, that's being true. You think it does, and it is true, and then the last piece is that it's justified, meaning that you have good evidence or reasons to support that belief. So if all three conditions are met, somebody has knowledge. Now, what Socrates basically said in his discussion with this Greek general named Meno was that knowledge is better than having a correct opinion. Because if you have knowledge, unlike a correct opinion, it doesn't just go away. A correct opinion, which is a true belief without justification, it's with you for now, but because it's not based on any evidence or reasons, it's something that will not stay in your mind. You will either forget it, or you will change your mind about it, or some combination of those. But basically, information, beliefs, even when they are true, if they're not based on any evidence, they don't stick with you. So it's better to have a knowledge, which is a justified true belief, because that extra ingredient of justification provides stability, and therefore it won't leave your mind. Hey there. Then we looked at Gettier, and Gettier was the main topic of last lecture. So let me just review again the material of him. Gettier is a 20th century, still living American philosopher, and he wrote this paper called Is Justified True Belief Knowledge in 1963. In the paper, he said that the classical Greek definition, justified true belief, is not necessarily correct, because there can be cases where somebody has a justified true belief, but still they don't have knowledge. And if that's possible, then it means that the definition is not actually complete. So he makes two preliminary points after that. First, he says it's possible to have a justified false belief. That's just a situation where someone has evidence to believe something, but it's not true. Okay, so like, I don't know, somebody's covering up a crime, and the evidence makes it look like somebody else did it, except not them. Then the detectives form the false belief with evidence that so-and-so is the guilty party, but it would be wrong. You know, justified false beliefs. If your car had been stolen, right, and you're like, you know, in the, I don't know where we go in public anymore. Well, you're like somewhere where you're not at your parking lot. You would be justified in believing that the car is still there because you know you parked it there, even if it was now stolen. You'd have a justified but nonetheless false belief that it was in the parking lot where you left it. Okay, so justified false belief is a possibility. And then there was the closure principle. The closure principle says that if you're justified in believing one statement and it entails a second one, then you're going to also be justified in believing the second one if you deduce it from the first. Okay, so like all cats are mammals. And right now, I'm justified in believing that there's a cat on my lap because it's peachy. And so, because I could feel her right there. So that's great evidence, isn't it? I would have to be really, really way off to be wrong about what I think is happening. So I believe there's a cat on my lap. I'm justified in believing that. And since I know that all cats are mammals, I'm deducing that there's a mammal in my lap. And therefore, do you understand the pattern? I'm also justified in believing that second thing, because it's just logically implied, in other words, entailed by the first thing. So long story short, when you have justification to believe something, you're going to also have justification for believing a second thing that follows from the first thing. Okay? Now, then we get these cases. The Gettier case, the famous classic Gettier case, is Smith and Jones job hunt. All right? So let's get through this recap of the Smith and Jones job hunt together. Smith and Jones are two people. What are they doing? That's something I would love you to tell me. What are Mr. Smith and Jones even doing in this so-called example? You'll tell me. Just go ahead. Be the first one. Tell me what it is. And then we'll go off from there. First thing to start this review of the Smith and Jones job hunt. What were the two people doing? I'm asking you, what were Smith and Jones doing in the example given by Gettier? Okay, they're both interviewing at a job. They're competing for a job position, and only one of them is going to get it. Right. So, Smith believes something. Smith forms a belief. What's the belief that Smith forms at the beginning of this little example? Smith comes to believe what statement? There's something that Smith ends up believing throughout the beginning of this example. That Jones will get the job, yes, but also part two. Let's get both of those things. It's that Jones will get the job and that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Perfect. Now, why does he think those things? Who could tell me that? Why does he believe those things? Okay, yes, that Jones is going to get the job. He has good reason to believe that. But I'm just asking, what are his reasons? Why does he think Jones will get the job? Okay, good, because the boss literally tells him, I'm going to hire Jones, not you. Good. Why does he think that he has 10 coins? Why does he think that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket there? Because he counted the Jones from Jones' pocket, exactly. So boss tells Smith, I'm going to give the job to Jones. Smith counts the coins of Jones' pocket, and he sees there's 10. So now he believes that the man who gets the job, that Jones will get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. And he's justified in believing that based on the description of his evidence. So after that, he deduces a second statement. Does anybody remember what the second statement is? It's very similar to Jones gets the job and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. It's just worded slightly differently. Do you remember what this entailment is that he deduces? Let me know that. Yes, Andrea, that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay, good. Now, based on the closure principle, since he was already justified in believing that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket for the reasons just mentioned, he's now likewise justified in believing that the man with, well, Brooklyn, it's actually important to word it the other way. It's the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. It's not stated that the man with 10 coins in his pocket will get the job because he has no knowledge about the relative distribution of coins in anyone else's pocket. It's not like he's counted everyone's pocket coins, and he's seen, he's the guy with 10, I'm the guy with 5, so I know that the man with 10 coins gets the job. See, he has no information about his own coins. So it's actually important to say it in that order. It's the man who gets the job who has 10 coins in his pocket, because he knows that Jones, or he believes that Jones will be that man, and he knows that Jones has that number of coins. Okay, so good. The man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Now, what's the little plot twist ending? Tell me how it ends. No, that's good. Just want to be clear about it, Brooklyn. And so let me know, though, how this little scenario finishes off. So you've taken me that far. Yeah, he did believe that Jones would get the job and that Jones has 10 coins. And then he did deduce that the man who gets the job has 10 coins. Boss comes back, good, Andrea, and he says, I was just kidding. I was just playing, Smith. For real, I'm hiring you. And then Smith, just randomly, total chance coincidence, has also got 10 coins in his own pocket. So what that means is that our statement, the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket, it ends up being a true proposition because it matches what happens. And it's something that Smith did believe. And it's something that Smith had good evidence to believe. But the real final point here is that although he has a justified true belief, he did not know that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in their pocket, because even though he got it right, and even though he had reasons for getting it right, he had reasons to believe this statement, the factors that make it true are not related at all to his evidence. His evidence was based on the presumption that Jones would get the job and the information that Jones had 10 coins in his pocket. But he did not think that he would get the job. And he also did not even know that he had 10 coins in his pocket. So he ended up with a true belief based on evidence that was unrelated to the factors that make it true. So it's just kind of like luck or random circumstantial chance that his belief based on that evidence turned out to be true. So it doesn't seem like it's actual real knowledge, but it is a justified true belief. And that would seem to show us that a justified true belief is not always knowledge. Now, that's the base case of Gettier's example. Like, that's the classic Gettier case that everyone always refers back to, which is supposed to show us that justified true belief has not been the correct definition of knowledge. Because if it was, again, then we would not be able to give an example where somebody has those conditions and they still do not have knowledge. If that was what knowledge defined as, then every situation where one had a justified true belief would be knowledge. Since he made this paper, since Gettier wrote this paper, which I don't know if I think I told you, right? It's like his only thing that he published, 2 pages, and then he just dropped the mic and said, okay, you guys all deal with this problem. I'm never going to write anything else. But ever since he did publish this paper, there's been a wave of literature where people have all tried to come up with a solution to the Gettier problem, to redefine knowledge in a way that doesn't lead to these problems. But nobody's been able to agree. There's been no widespread agreement on what the correct definition of knowledge is in the wake of his essay. There's also been a lot of development of other Gettier cases, that make the same point, but use different examples. I think I might have talked to you guys about at least one last time. Did I talk to you about, this was probably part of the Zoom thing at the end, but did I tell the Zoomers about when I was looking for my car in a parking lot? Does anyone remember that example? If you do, just let me know in the chat here. Yeah, okay, good. So that's one example. I'm going to try and say it very fast because I don't want to waste too much time on it. But basically, here's what happened. I left my car in a parking lot. I was in a rush to get to the meeting that I had to go to. Later on, I'm coming back to that parking lot, and I'm kind of not so familiar with which aisle I parked my car in. But I'm looking for the car. And I drive a black BMW, and I saw a black BMW in an aisle, which I presumed was my car. So seeing that car there, thinking it's mine, I had this belief. My car is parked in that aisle, okay? And then as I approached that car, I recognized, wait a minute, oops, that's not my car. This is just another car which has an identical build. But coincidentally, 2 cars down in the same aisle, which was blocked from my view at first, there actually was my car. But initially I had not seen it. So think about what my belief was before. My car is in that aisle. Was that true? Yes. Did I believe that? Yes. Did I have a reason to believe that? Yes, because I saw what I thought was the car, and that was my evidence, the misleading justification. So I had a justified, true belief that my car was in that aisle. But hopefully it rings true to your common sense that although I satisfied justified true belief, I did not know that my car was there because it just was based on information from the other car. Okay, 2 more, and then I'll end it with that. Just 2 more quick get-your cases, then we're moving on to Descartes, okay? This is another one in the literature that sometimes is mentioned. So suppose someone's driving down the freeway, they look off to their right, and they see what by all appearances is a barn. It looks like it's like a farmhouse barn. So the driver in the car who sees that in the field, they believe this. There's a barn in the field, okay? There's a barn over there in the field. Now, the fact is that when you get closer to that thing, you realize, wait, it's not a barn. This is just a wall. There's no interior. So if you looked at it from just a driver's position as you pass by, it would look like a barn from the road. But up close, it's not a barn. It's just a facade. It's like a decoy. It's just one wall with no interior, so it's not actually a barn. But behind the facade, behind that wall, there actually is what? If you're hip to these get-your cases, you should be able to tell me. Behind the wall, which the driver sees and mistakenly believes there's a barn in that field because they see that wall, there actually was a barn, okay, like a real barn. Okay, so now let's go back to the example. What did our driver believe? What was the proposition believed by the driver? Just tell me. Well, okay, good. You're mentioning that there's a barn in that field. Exactly, yes. That there was a barn in that field. And is that true? Is there a barn in that field in this example that we're imagining? Yes, there is. And was the person justified in believing it? It's kind of like my car thing. Well, yeah, the person saw something that definitely looked like a barn, so that was good reason to believe so. And it turned out to be true, and they believed it. But do you want to say that that person knows there's a barn in the field? It seems like there's a mismatch between the fact that led them to believe that there was a barn and the actual barn itself. So yet again, it seems like a justified true belief, which fails as knowledge. Yeah, it's not the one that he thought it was, so it isn't really knowledge. It's a belief which is true, but it was based on other facts besides the fact that makes it true. Here's the last one, okay? I could do these all day because there's so many of them I know about, but last one, okay? So someone is on a lot of, let's say, hallucinatory drugs. So they're starting to hallucinate and see things. And one thing they're seeing in front of them, which is not real, but they think it is an elephant. So they're like, whoa, there's an elephant in this room. There's an elephant in this room, if that's what they believe. Now, what they were looking at was not an elephant. It was a hallucination. It's just a phantasm, a thing made by the brain. It's not really there. But what they don't know is that in like a closed section of that room where they cannot see, there actually is a baby elephant there sleeping. So in that case, the person's belief that there's an elephant in the room turned out to be a true statement. There is an elephant in that room. They believed it. But do you think that person, we should say they knew there was an elephant in the room? They had knowledge. It's not really knowledge, is it? If it was based on some other alternative factor from the one that makes the statement be actually true. So all this seems to show us is that we don't have the real clear definition or understanding of knowledge that we thought we had for thousands of years. I mean, for a long time, since the ancient Greeks all the way till 1963, this was basically unchallenged. People said, if you believe something, it's true, and you have good evidence, that's knowledge. What? That's what it is to know something. Now Getier's arrived on the scene, and he's just totally opened a whole can of worms. Like, well, we are not so much confident that we know the definition anymore. It seems like it's getting a belief that's true, something having to do with justification, But there's another element that we can't quite find out what it is yet. It's something that will make it so that when you get the belief right, when you get a true belief, that it's not just luck or chance. It's not a coincidence. It has to be not coincidentally correct, but correct because of the evidence that you used. But the thing is, it's so hard to actually clearly and precisely state what that definition is and what that additional element can be. So if anybody's ever able to solve the Gettier problem, you know, you'll be a permanent figure in the academy, because that's something that's animated in a lot of minds. A lot of paper has been printed on this particular topic. A lot of words have been said about it. Okay, so anyway, though, we have one more author on the same topic of epistemology, and we're going to try to at least get through most of it today. If there's something that's left over, then we can come back to it on Tuesday after the weekend. But the next man that we're going to talk about here is the great French philosopher Rene Descartes. Okay, so Peachy, she's being a really good kitty today. She just wants a lot of attention. Cat. Okay, so yeah, Rene Descartes. This is a French philosopher of the 17th century. He lived from 1596 until 1650. Okay, and sorry, open my book to that part. There's this little umlaut above A. Rene, he's French. In 1641, he wrote a very important book. It's like a classic work, and it's called The Meditations. The Meditations by Descartes from 1641. In fact, the full title is a little bit more wordy sounding. It's Meditations on First Philosophy, but a lot of people just refer to it by a shorthand of The Meditations. So this is a book that's got 6 chapters, and they're numbered as Meditation 1, Meditation 2, Meditation 3, 4, 5, and 6. So there's 6 chapters, Meditation 1 through 6. Today's reading assigned for the class is just the first 2 chapters of this book. So Meditation 1 and 2, that's what we're now about to get into. Meditations 1 and 2, the first 2 chapters of this classic book, The Meditations. Descartes, he was a famous philosopher, but also he was well known in a couple of other academic disciplines too. He was very good in mathematics, and he was a pioneer in geometry. Anybody who's studied a little geometry and you've learned about what they call the Cartesian coordinates on the coordinate plane, that's named after Descartes. Cartesian is a namesake from Descartes. So he's had a big impact, you know, on the academy and in higher learning. He did important work in philosophy, mathematics, and geometry, but he's probably most well known for his philosophical work. This book, 1641, The Meditations, there was a certain goal that he had in mind when he wrote it. And here's what that goal was. The goal was to try and discover what is certain, what is something that is totally certain that we would not ever be able to doubt. Descartes noticed something, that in the time he wrote this, so the year is 1641, and this is what some call the early modern period in the West. It's following closely on the Renaissance period, and some also refer to this century, 17th century, as like the age of reason, because we're starting to see rapid advances in all these scientific disciplines, and in math, and in art, and even in literature. So there seems to be an explosion of knowledge in almost every field, just to name a few. Newton's laws of physics were now developed, and we're starting to learn much more about the physical behavior of objects in space. Kepler is learning about the elliptical orbit of the planets that circle the sun. Galileo and Copernicus had recently discovered, using newly invented telescopes, that we orbit the sun and not the other way around. More realistic artistic techniques are being developed. So paintings now have more realism because there's the depth of field created by the vanishing point. In geometry, we're making strides. Calculus is being invented by Leibniz and by Newton. We're starting to learn that the most fundamental unit of biological matter is the cell. So I mean, it's just it's a kind of exciting time for people in learned sphere of society to really press all this new information and knowledge onto the world. But Descartes worried about something. He said, if we're going to start having all this major advances in knowledge, by the way, why was that happening? I mean, many people think it's because a lot of this information and stuff had been suppressed during the early Christian and medieval period, because some of the knowledge that was developed, secular knowledge, runs contrary to certain orthodox doctrines of the church. Like the church had held that the earth is the center of the universe. And so there was actually persecution of Galileo. They forced him to recant his testimony. The Catholic Church thought that it was heretical to suggest that God would have created the universe with man not being right in the middle. So I mean, as the church's influence over the world started to break down, and we started to have more of a division of church and state, there's more space for the academy and for secular knowledge to grow on its own. And so he's a part of that. He's a part of that intellectual time period and movement. And he says, let's try to make sure that we get this started off on the right foot. Let's make sure that our big growing enterprise of knowledge is going to be set down on an absolutely firm foundation. So think of it as a metaphor of architecture. If you have like a really big, beautiful building, no matter how ornate and wonderful and towering the structure may be, if it's built on a loose foundation of like shaky quicksand, then it's liable to probably just collapse at some future time. And so he says, I don't want to have to go through that process with this scientific knowledge and academic knowledge that we are developing. We don't want to basically have to go back in like a century and realize, oops, there were some false assumptions right there at the foundations of our assumptions in science. And now we got to basically abandon all the claims that we built up in that whole field, right? So he says, let's make sure to set this on a solid foundation. And the way he thinks to do that is to discover what is totally certain. What is something or anything that is so certain that it could never be doubted? And he says, if we can find out what that is, then we will have our foundation stone that can serve as the base for the body of knowledge that we are now building upon it. So the Meditations is that book which engages in this goal. The mission, the project, is a quest for certainty. Let's try to find what is certain. So how do we do that? Okay, Descartes proposes a method. He says there's a way that you can go about trying to find certainty. Let me read a little bit. You can hear him say this, so you can hear the author put it in his words. He starts off by just saying, when I was a little kid growing up, how little children are naive and unexperienced, they might sometimes believe things are true, like there's the boogeyman or Santa or whatever, and then later you get older and you're like, wow, I was so silly when I was a kid because I believe things that are clearly false. He says, I don't want to have to repeat that same process as a scientist or as an academic that I experienced as a kid. So he says here, some years ago, it's on page 351, this is the beginning of the meditation, chapter 1. So he says, some years ago I was struck by the large number of falsehoods that I had accepted as true in my childhood, and by the highly doubtful nature of the whole structure that I had been based on them. I realized that it was necessary once in the course of my life to demolish completely everything and start again right from the foundations if I wanted to establish anything at all in the sciences that was stable and likely to last. But the task looked enormous, and I began to wait until I should reach a mature enough age to ensure that no subsequent time in my life would be better for tackling this inquiry. That led me to put it off for so long that now I would be to blame if by pondering over it anymore, I wasted the time still left for carrying it out. So today I have totally rid my mind of all worries and arranged for myself a clear stretch of free time. I am alone, and at last I will devote myself sincerely and without reservation to the general demolition of my opinions. So how then can we discover what is known with total certainty? Descartes proposes this method, and it's kind of famously known as the method of doubt. So you want to know, I'll tell you, how does Descartes propose or suggest that we find that certainty? He says, let me tell you, here's the way to do it. Use what's called the method of doubt. Okay, this kitty is crazy. You guys, do you see what's going on here? I mean, she's like, she's funny. It's constantly cute. But okay, back to this, the method of doubt. That's what's going on next. Peachy. Okay, come on, Kitty. Gotta put you down for a minute. The method of doubt. Okay, so the method of doubt says to do this. Assume to be false anything and everything that could even possibly be doubted. So if something could be doubted, even if it's not likely to be false, even if it's very far removed from normally you doubting it, we're talking if it's even like any chance, like 0.000001% chance that it's false, then that's not absolutely certain, and we will assume it is. This is the method that he suggests. So let me put it here. Good girl. So assume to be false anything that can possibly be doubted. Okay, that's the method of doubt. Yes, she's very smart. This is like a genius cat. I don't know. I mean, I know I'm biased, but I've had a lot of cats. I've interacted with a lot of cats, and she's just something else. But okay, back to this. Method of doubt. Yeah, assume to be false anything and everything that could even possibly be doubted. This is kind of like a method by which we eliminate all the doubtful things, and then if anything's left over that remains, that's the stuff that we can say is totally certain. And that will be our foundation stone that we're looking for as we go on this search for total certainty. When I was back in college at UCLA, I had a class on this type of material, and one of my professors I thought gave a good example. I don't know if, I mean, maybe it's a good one, maybe it's not, but I'll pass it on to you. Suppose that someone was like out at the grocery store and they were just trying to buy, let's talk about like a nice apple. But they wanted it to be not just any apple, they wanted it to be really special, like a perfect apple, like they're gonna give it to one of their teachers as a gift, you know, like they used to do in the old days. So this has gotta be that perfect, pristine, ideal specimen. So they go to the apple barrel and they pick one out and they're like, this is it, this is the one. But wait, not quite. They turn it around, they see another angle, and they're like, wow, there's a small little bruise, little divot there. There's a blemish on this apple. It's almost there, 99%, but not perfect. So you set it to the side, and it's on to the next. And you keep going through the cart until eventually you get to that one that you're like, wow, this can't be better. It's an ideal, perfect apple with no flaws. Okay, now in this case, the method of doubt, we're not picking apples out of a barrel and sorting through them, but what we are doing is going through the beliefs in our belief system, and we're holding them up to the light of the most intense scrutiny and doubt. And what we're doing is, if there's any chance that it's wrong, even if we don't normally think that it's wrong, but even if there's a chance, then we're going to assume that it's not correct, and we're going to assume that it is like literally false, set it to the side, and it's on to the next and on to the next until hopefully we eliminate all the things that are doubtful, and we're only left with the things that are totally certain. So this is the method that he gives to you as a tool to utilize in this effort to try and find what is totally certain. Use the method of doubt. Okay, so when we're using the method of doubt, next question is, well, what things can be doubted based on this? What things are we going to assume as false as long as we are applying this methodology? Okay, well, it's going to be pretty far-reaching, so I'll talk to you now about that. He says, with the method of doubt, right off the bat, we can eliminate a whole mainstream source of beliefs that we always rely on, and that's all the beliefs that are given from sense perception. Okay, so point, all beliefs that are based on sense perception can be doubted. All beliefs that are based on sense perception can be doubted. What's sense perception? It's the five senses. It's sight, taste, touch, hearing, and smell. The five senses that we all have. Well, we don't all have them in the world, but probably most all of us have it in this class at least. The familiar five senses give us so much information about what's going on. I mean, how do you know what's going on in your immediate environment? Well, it's by means of the five senses. So like if I hear an ambulance siren blaring, the hearing of it, now I have knowledge that there's some kind of paramedic driving around in my neighborhood. If I smell like a barbecue, then I gain knowledge based on the scent that there's somebody that's doing a barbecue cooking meat around me, right? If I just see something, like I see, I don't know, like I see an old friend, then it's like I know he's alive because I could just see the person in front of me talking or walking or something, right? So sight, taste, touch, hearing, and smell. Right now, even if I had my eyes closed and I couldn't see anything or even hear anything, I would have the tactile sensation of like this chair that I'm seated on, and I would then know that, okay, I'm seated on a chair because I could feel it on my body, the pressure against my body. So we gain knowledge about the world around us. Imagine how much more difficult it would be for you to know anything if you had no ability to see, taste, touch, hear, or smell. I mean, you'd kind of just be at a loss, right? So even right now, how do you know that you're watching this lecture? How do you know that you're in your room or wherever you happen to be? It's because if you look around, you gain information from your vision. So five senses are huge, right? They tell us so much. But what he's saying now, Descartes, is that even though we always usually trust our five senses, as we kind of have to, they're not absolutely 100% accurate all the time. And there's always the possibility they could be wrong. So can anyone tell me, how is it possible for your senses to fail you, for you to have sense perception, but you come up with the wrong belief from it? Can anybody give me a possible scenario like that where you thought you saw, taste, touch, heard, or smelled something, but you are not correct? What could happen that would make that possible? If you see something that was there but wasn't, yes, Ronald, I agree. It's not the most detailed example, but yes, in general, if you thought you saw something that was not actually there. So like, I don't know, you see shadows cast about that are from the branch of a tree, and you think it's like an intruder coming to your house because you're in your bedroom and you see that one image cast against your wall and it looks like an arm. Yeah, you thought you heard someone call your name, but it was just the sound of I don't know, something else in the environment. If someone is feverish, yes, then you might be actually going through delusions. You might be thinking you see things, even hallucinating or hearing auditory hallucinations. Sometimes there's optical illusions, like you put a knife in a glass of water and it looks like it's bent at the water line, but it's really not bent. It's just because the ray of light has been refracted by the passage through the water. If you think you saw a pen thrown across the room, but it was actually a stick, yes. If you're in a hot environment and you look to the distance and you think you see a body of water, but that's just a mirage produced by the distortion of the effective heat on your field of vision. So those are some cases of where sense perception can fail. But now I want to go even further. How could it be possible for you to be incorrect right now about the thought that you're watching this lecture? Like, what would have to be the case for you to doubt this, that you're watching a lecture right now, or that you're a student at Cal State Fullerton? How do you think those things could possibly be doubted? Or that like you're even in your room right now? Is that something that you could doubt? How could that be doubted? If it was all a simulation, good, Andrea, yes, possibly. What do you think would be Descartes' angle on that? Writing in the year 1641, before we had computers, yes, talks about dreams, exactly there, Panda. So he says, although we definitely have a tendency to trust our perception, with special exceptions aside, like, I mean, if you were sleep deprived or on some kind of drugs, maybe you'd be like, I don't know if I should trust everything I think I'm seeing and hearing. But in everyday life, you basically do. But even though you do, you cannot rule out the possibility that you're dreaming, okay? And he says that. He says, since dreams could exist, maybe you're having a dream right now. Maybe you think you're attending a lecture as a student at Cal State Fullerton, but this isn't even really happening. And right now you're asleep. And the presentation of these images and sounds is all an illusion. That's something that I guess is possible. Now, I know what you're going to think. You're going to think, come on, though, not really. I understand very full well that this is not a dream because this is very detailed, this is very vivid. When I'm having dreams, they're like hazy and vague and non-distinct. But this, I mean, it's so vivid and clear, I can tell the difference, and I know I'm not dreaming. But what Descartes says is, no, I'm not going to let you have that, because dreams can be very realistic. And I'm sure that I don't have to tell you that sometimes dreams are so realistic that when you're having them, you could swear that they're real. Speaking from my own experience, I know that has happened to me many times. For some reason, I don't know why, I seem like I have more vivid memories of the less pleasant dreams. But I'll have these dreams where it's like, okay, I could be in a classroom trying to teach a lesson. And since the pandemic, I've had these dreams too, which, yeah, it's weird. So like I'll be in the classroom trying to teach, and I'll be up there, and you know, in the dream world, you kind of can't really like read or think too like logically. So I'll be up there trying to give some ideas, and in the dream, I'm like losing my train of thought, and it's getting awkward because I kind of don't know how to get back into the topic. And I'm like, man, this is the worst lecture ever. I'm kind of embarrassed. And then all of a sudden I wake up and I'm like, yes, okay, good. That did not actually happen. And I mean, that's just a light example. That's just something slight. But I mean, like another case, you know, I'm driving in the dream. All of a sudden, oops, I lose control of the vehicle. Now I'm flying off the side of like a cliff, and I'm like, oh no, I'm about to die for real. Then I wake up and I'm like, yes, okay, not actually real. So we've all, I'm sure, had dreams with some degree of vividness. And since that is possible, you cannot rule out the possibility that you're dreaming right now. The other thing is, too, you think you have this ability to distinguish between the dream life and your waking life. But if you've been dreaming the whole time, and you've never even been awake yet the whole time you've been alive, then you have nothing to compare the character of your experience with. You know, then you don't have access to the waking world. And therefore, you would not be able to really specify how you have evidence that you're not dreaming. Okay, so in a more modern context, yes, Brooklyn and Andrea, we talk today sometimes about living in a simulation. You've heard even smart people suggest that this is possible. If this is a simulation, I'm kind of a little sad and upset with the programmers. Why are they putting us through this pandemic and all these other horrible things? But yeah, maybe you're living in a video game and you're just a character that some player is playing in another dimension, and then the reality around you isn't real. In films, this theme has been explored, of course, right? We've all perhaps heard the "it was all a dream" type of plot line. Matrix is, you know, you're in a simulation controlled by machines or aliens or whatever. Inception, there's like this big dream world that kind of you keep going back and forth between. Well, these skeptical scenarios are kind of all traceable to the writings of skeptical philosophers like Descartes and others. So, okay, this gives us one thing that we're going to assume is false using the method of doubt. Since it's possible to doubt the reality of your perceptions, we will just suppose that, yeah, you actually are dreaming. The body you think you have, you look in the mirror, you're like, that's me. We're going to say that's not even real. The body you think you have is a dream body. Maybe you don't have that body, or maybe you're just a gas cloud, or maybe you have a fully different appearance if you could really see it, which you've never seen before. So all bets are off. All the things that you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell, we're just assuming it's all fake now. So this is now like a little argument. The first premise is, to know anything from sense perception, I must know that I'm not dreaming. Okay, and then the second premise of the argument just affirms that there is no way to know I'm not dreaming. So the conclusion, which we place below this line, what will it be? To know anything from sense perception, I first need to know that I'm not dreaming, but there is no way to know that I'm not dreaming. So therefore, I do not know anything from sense perception. All right. So there you go. This method of doubt has snatched away all the knowledge that you thought you had about the five senses and the things that you perceived with them. But then he continues from there. So as we continue through this method of doubt, through the meditations, the next question is there anything, though, that's certain enough to bypass this method of doubt that we can still claim to know for sure? So we've ruled out the five senses, but is there something that's more certain than that? Well, the next thing he suggests is, well, what about like math or just geometry or trigonometry? You know, like if I tell you that there are four sides on a square, you might say, well, that's something that is definitely 100% certain, because that doesn't even assume the existence of any reality. Like if I tell you that the square root of 9 is 3, or that 9 times 9 is 81, that doesn't even assume that there is an external reality. It's just pure abstract ideas of math, of number, of quantity, of addition, of geometric shape. So you might argue that formal knowledge of things that are not based on the five senses, like that all of the points that lie on the perimeter of a circle are equally distant from the radius of the circle, you might argue that that stuff, pure math, pure geometry, just in the mind's eye you have this knowledge, that that's something that is totally certain. But once again, Descartes, kind of a tough customer, says, I understand why that sounds like it's more certain, but still even that can be doubted. Okay, let me read first this point that he's talking about. So he says, a reasonable conclusion might be that physics, astronomy, medicine, and all other disciplines which depend on the study of composite things are doubtful, while arithmetic, geometry, and subjects of this kind, which deal only with the simplest and most general things, regardless of whether they really exist or not, contain something more certain. Because whether I'm awake or asleep, 2 plus 3 equals 5, and a square has no more than 4 sides. It would seem impossible that these kind of very obvious truths could have any suspicion of being false. So that's where he's just trying to sort of make it seem as if, wouldn't it be reasonable to believe that that's more certain? But next up, he says, here's the reason that even that can be doubted, okay? So in Descartes' time, it's 1641, and anybody who's writing in the academy would be a Christian and a believer in God, and so is Descartes. So he says to his audience, who he knows are all fellow believers, but we believe God exists, and God is almighty. God, as we've discussed earlier in the semester, is this omnipotent, all-powerful being. So since he's awesomely powerful and he has infinite power, it's within the power of God, if he really wanted to make us feel like we know something totally certain when we do math, elementary math, but he's the one that's manipulating our beliefs about that, so that even though it feels like it's totally certain, it's actually not correct. So do you understand? He poses that as the possible reason for doubt, that God, with his awesome almighty power, could manipulate your beliefs about even math, geometry, etc., so that they're not correct. But, okay, now follow me here. He says, who could do it? God. But then he quickly withdraws that statement. He says, although I've said God could do this, there's something about God that even though he has the power to do that, he would not choose to use his power to do that. Why do you think he says that even if it's within the power of God to mess with your beliefs about math and everything else, that he would not choose to do that? Why do you think that's something that Descartes now says? Because he went to some trouble to mention that God, he could do anything, so he could make you get these things wrong. But having said so, he then says, but never mind that I said that, because although he could, he wouldn't do that. Why not? Why do you think Descartes argues that God has the power to mess with your beliefs about even math, but that he would not do it? What is it about God that would make him not do it? Because he's supposed to be all good. Yes, Andrea. He's not just all powerful, but he's also supposed to be perfectly good, omnibenevolent. That means that he's as good as anything could be, as he's infinitely good. But if God just creates us and sets us up to get everything wrong, like he sets us up to fail, he makes us believe that there's things that are happening that aren't really happening, or he causes us to believe that we know how to do math, but we really don't, that would not be good. That would be deceptive. That would be manipulative of us. And that would run contrary to his perfection and goodness. So he would not do that, even though he could. So then what does Descartes say about this math stuff? He says, okay, well, God, he could, but he wouldn't. but there could be something that's different from God, but that's still like superior to us or whatever, which could be the thing that causes this deception. So he postulates the possibility of, ready for this, an evil demon. He says, could it possibly be that God, because he's too good, would never do that, but maybe an evil demon who's below God, right? Here's God, here's the evil demon. He's less powerful, but he's more powerful than us down here. So he has the ability to manipulate us and warp our perception and make us think that we're doing math problems right, but we're not. Maybe this evil demon then could be the source of our deception and error. So you understand, he kind of outsources the deception and bad stuff to this other evil, malicious demon who's trying his best to manipulate and deceive you. In that way, we get the possibility of doubt, but we don't say anything bad or inconsistent with the perfection of God. So here I'm going to make that point clear by writing it on the board. And then I'll read a little of Descartes so you can hear his statement on that. What he's saying here is that even beliefs about math and logic, etc., can be doubted. Because an evil demon could be manipulating us. Okay, now you got to remember, okay, like Descartes, he lives in the year 1641, and that you see his lifespan from earlier, 1596 to 1650. So when he talks about this source of deception that's mastering your consciousness and making you believe all these false things about math, about logic, about whatever, if he had been writing this in the year 2020, it would be a little probably more science fictional. It would probably be like, oh, so what if there was a mad scientist and you're just a brain in a jar and he's stimulating your brain electronically and chemically so that it has the belief, oh, I'm watching a lecture, I'm a college student, or I'm a professor and I've got a cat, but you're really a brain in a vat and there's just this master mad scientist that's controlling you. That would be like a more modern kind of, example of a story like this. But he's writing in 1641, and there wasn't talk of like scientists, putting a brain in formaldehyde and all that. But they did have religious ideas, and so he just talks about it as though there was some type of malicious demon that could present these delusions and illusions to you. So here I'll read this. He says, firmly rooted in my mind is the long-standing belief that there's an omnipotent God who made me the kind of creature that I am. How do I know that he has not brought it about that there is no earth, sky, extended thing, shape, size, place, while at the same time ensuring that all these things appear to me to exist just as they do now? Moreover, since I sometimes consider that others go astray in cases where they think they have the most perfect knowledge, may I not similarly go astray when I add 2 and 3 or count the sides of a square, or in some even simpler matter, if that is imaginable? And then he says this, but perhaps God would not have wished me to be deceived in this way, since he is said to be supremely good. So then, as he continues on the next column, he says, I will therefore suppose not that God, who is supremely good and the source of truth, but rather some malicious demon of the utmost power and cunning, has employed all his energy to deceive me. I shall think that the sky, air, earth, color, shape, sound, and all external things are merely the delusions of dreams which he has devised to ensnare my judgment. I shall consider myself as not having hands or eyes or flesh or blood or senses, but as falsely believing that I have all these things. I shall stubbornly and firmly persist in this meditation, and even if it is not in my power to know anything true, I shall at least do what is in my power, and that is resolutely guard against accepting any falsehoods, so that the deceiver, however powerful and cunning he may be, will not be able to impose on me in the slightest degree. Okay, so you hear what he said. He said, I'm using a method of doubt, and why am I doing it? Because I'm on a search to find what is certain. And the only way to do that is to eliminate from my beliefs all the things that at least have a chance to be false. And if we're going to take this method of doubt to the extreme, then it seems like the things that you perceive are within the realm of doubt because you could be dreaming. And it seems like even the stuff that seems more certain than that, like that when you do 2 + 3 is 5, that could be doubtful because God, oh wait, never mind, not God, but maybe an evil demon could be manipulating you about those things. So that's where the first chapter of the Meditations, Meditation 1, that's where it ends. And Descartes, he's kind of like an effective writer. He almost writes sometimes like a novelist in my mind. And it seems sort of like, I used to study literature too. This is kind of like the end of the chapter where it's like one of those cliffhangers, you know. A really good writer of fiction will say, you really want to get into that next chapter because there's some unresolved things at the end of this chapter, right? That's like a potboiler novel. When you get to one chapter, you can't let it go because these questions loom. And so that's how this is. At the end of Meditation 1, here's what the reader's thought is. Wait, but do we get any knowledge anymore, or is that it? Do we just not know anything? Is the method of doubt showing us that, in fact, nothing is certain, and there's really nothing that we can hang on to and depend on as totally certain? But that's when Meditation 2, the second chapter, starts. And it's from that kind of ground zero of having no certainty that he starts to build us back up to the things that he thinks actually can be known for sure. So that's where the first meditation ends, and now the second one starts. Before I start talking about the basic stuff in the second meditation, I want to read a little more of a quote here from another portion of the first meditation. He says, when he's talking about how the dreams can be a reason to doubt your senses, he says, whatever I have up till now acquired as most true, I've acquired either from the senses or through the senses. But from time to time I have found that the senses deceive, and it is prudent never to trust completely those that have deceived us before. Yet, although the senses occasionally deceive with respect to objects which are very small or in the distance, there are many other beliefs about which doubt is quite impossible, even though they are derived from the senses. Okay, so let me explain something. The way that Descartes writes sometimes is that he kind of wants to almost have like a conversation, like a tug and pull of two people like that are opponents. But since he's writing by himself, he sometimes addresses his own identity as like a devil's advocate. So sometimes he'll like pose critical questions against his own argument, and you just got to be able to notice when he's switching between his own voice and the voice of his like imagined critic. And that's kind of what he does here. He says, but can you really doubt your senses? He says, although they deceive us sometimes with small objects, or there's many things that it's not possible to doubt. For example, that I'm here sitting by the fire, wearing a winter dressing gown, holding this piece of paper in my hands. How could that be denied? How could it be denied that these hands or the body are mine, unless perhaps I were a madman? But now he answers that statement and says, as if I were not a man who sleeps at night, and regularly has all the same experiences while asleep that madmen do when awake, sometimes even more improbable ones. How often asleep at night am I convinced of just such familiar events, that I'm here in my dressing gown sitting by the fire, when in fact I'm lying undressed in bed. So suppose then that I am dreaming, and that these particulars, that my eyes are open, that I'm moving my head, stretching out my hands, are not true. Perhaps indeed I don't even have such hands or a body at all. Nonetheless, and then we continue from there. So the first meditation ends. How are we going to get back to something certain? Well, that's how the second meditation begins. Okay, so in the second meditation, Descartes says, are we lost completely without anything that we can hold on to and say we know for sure? It seems like most everything's been dismissed, but there's still something though. There's at least one thing that can't be doubted. And I'm going to ask you, can you think of what that could be? I mean, just, you're the meditator now. You're the meditator. Maybe you're dreaming. Maybe there's a demon that's messing with your beliefs about math. But even if all that was happening to you right now, what is one thing that you know for sure? Even if everything else is fake and false, what's something that you would still know currently, right now, at this present moment, that you cannot doubt? It's like, it almost makes no sense to doubt this thing. It's like a contradiction to think that it's not true. That, okay, Ronald, you're saying that you're alive, and Ashkan, you're saying that you exist. Exactly. That you exist, not death. You're not dead yet. That you're alive, okay? Well, I don't know if I want to say the word alive, because it implies that you have a body or that you're some type of like embodied living organism, existence. But how is it that you know you exist? How is it, let's put it this way. Why does it make no sense to say, I don't think I exist? How come that is like an incoherent statement, a self-contradicting statement? Why is it impossible for you to doubt that you exist? Or that you, how is it impossible to doubt your existence? Why is it just totally illogical to have a doubt about that? I'm just asking for a little more substantive response because you get the right idea that your existence, you can't doubt it, correct. But why not? Because you have the ability to doubt it. That means that you can think. Yes, Brooklyn. So the very fact that you're thinking of anything just verifies the existence of you, the thinker. So like, for example, if you're dreaming right now, and this is a weird, I don't know, good dream, nightmare, I don't know if you find it pleasing or not, but if this is a dream that you're having, maybe then you're not actually a student, maybe this lecture isn't even real, maybe the planet Earth is not even a real thing. But if there's a dream, there has to be a dreamer having the dream, right? So even if the stuff that you're dreaming of is false, the very fact that you're even having thoughts in the first place must mean that you have consciousness and you're something that exists. Yeah, if you didn't exist, then of course you couldn't be questioning your existence, right? So this thought makes no sense. I don't think I exist. Don't you understand that makes no sense? Because if you're thinking about the question, then the existence of thinking is proof of your existence. Okay, so that's it. There's this one thing that you know that you cannot doubt. The method of doubt now, we've finally found something that it cannot touch. And the thing that it can't cause you to doubt is that you exist. So, now this is the basis of a very famous quote of Descartes. And this quote of Descartes is like a quotable quote that it seems to me has escaped outside of the ivory tower of the academy and of philosophy and has somehow trickled down into everyday consciousness. Like a lot of people have heard this quote. Maybe you don't even know that you've heard it, but you have. Let's see if you know it. A famous quote of Descartes is, I think, and then blank, there's something that goes after that. Do you know what this quote is? Because it's exactly what this point is that we've just now discussed. Some philosopher someday said, I think, therefore I am. Exactly, yes. I think, therefore I am. If you've ever heard that quote, it's like, it's sort of weird. I remember hearing that quote before I ever read Descartes, and it's like, where did I hear it from? It's like, you don't just normally read these books. But yeah, it comes from Descartes, and it comes from his meditations. I think, therefore I am. Consider what it means. It means because I'm thinking, therefore I know that I am, that I exist. Now in the original Latin, because that's what he wrote this book in before it was translated into English, it's cogito ergo sum. Okay, so that's the Latin. And it translates to, cogito means consciousness. That's the derived root of our word, like cognitive. So consciousness or thought. Ergo means therefore, like implication or entailment. So consciousness implies, and sum means reality or existence. So since I'm thinking, that implies that I do exist. Cogito ergo sum, or in English, I think, therefore I am. So finally we've got to it. Something that you know is true, that you can't possibly doubt, and it's your existence. But let's go even a little further here with this. According to the method of doubt, who do you know to exist with total certainty? Who is the person that you know exists with absolute and total certainty in such a way that it's not possible to doubt? Which person? Yeah, just you, exactly. But what about me? Do you know that I exist? Or the other students? Or your mom and dad? Do you know that they exist? That's the other question now. Because you said me, and that's the right answer, so you must understand that there's another part of that. So, yeah, they could just be all illusions formed in your dream, right? Exactly. So why is it that you're not sure that I exist? Because whose consciousness do you have first-person access to? Just yours. Every other mind, every other person, if they're real, are different from you. They're others. So all you can do is be a third-person observer of who they are and what their consciousness is. But you don't get to be behind the scenes, feeling what they feel, thinking what they think as they think their thoughts. You only have access, first-person access, to your own thoughts and sensations. So you can only verify the existence of one consciousness because you only have one. All the others, it's sort of like they could just be dream people. You know, like when you have real dreams, You know, you're sometimes interacting with people in the dream, but that's not a real life interaction with another flesh and blood person. That's just you and your mind having projections from your imagination of another person. So it's possible, perhaps, that all the other minds out there are just not real people, but there's at least one, and it's you, okay? Now, in the end, let me kind of give you a little preview of what happens later in his book. Because if you just ended here, you might be like, wow, Descartes is so trippy. The way he talks is like nothing exists. It's just me and the world's a dream. How about that? But to be honest with you, it only seems like that at this stage of his book. When you go on and you read the whole thing, and we will actually look at chapter 6 in a few weeks, what you come to understand is that he takes a big, long, winding loop back to like everyday common sense. So at the end of the book, he's prepared to say, okay, yeah, actually we do know that the world exists, that your perception is accurate, that when you see things, that's generally how they really are, and that there are other minds. It's not just you. It's not like you're the only consciousness and the whole universe is a dream. No, there's other minds, and so it's all basically like what you would have thought before. But it takes him 6 chapters to get to that result because he doesn't want to just assume it or take it for granted, which is what we usually do. He wants to, he thinks, be able to prove it somehow through like deductive argument that takes steps. And so he starts with nothing. He builds up to like, okay, well, at least I have to exist. That can't be doubted. And then from there, there's a further series of steps that ultimately gets into, we can trust our perception more or less, although sometimes we do make mistakes. We will talk a lot more about the development of this argument when we get to that part of the class later, but I'll just give you a sort of little preview of it. Here's the order of steps that he takes. So it's like, okay, I know I exist because I'm thinking. Maybe I don't even have a body. Maybe my physical existence is doubtful, but I know I at least have this consciousness. So, you know, I know that much. I'm a conscious thing. I'm a mind that can think. Okay, after that he says, well, in the mind, there are ideas. And one of these ideas is the idea of God. And that's when he says, the idea of God, though, is too great and too infinite for it to be created by me, because I'm just a finite being. So that must mean that the idea of God that I've got has come down to me from something that is infinite, because nothing finite could have generated the idea. This is almost like a little spin-off of the ontological argument, because it has the form, I have an idea of God, and it's too great to not be real. Anyway, long story short, he thinks then he's proving God exists. So it goes from, I know I exist, and because I have an idea of God, he must exist too. And then after that, he says, since God must exist, otherwise I could not have an idea of him, but I do. Since God must exist, that furthermore must mean that he's perfectly good. And since he's omnibenevolent, he would not want to deceive me. So when I have perceptions that are very clear, very distinct, very obvious, those are the kind of perceptions that God would not want for me to be wrong about. Because again, he's perfect and good, and he therefore doesn't want me to make mistakes all the time. So it's kind of like the guarantee provided by God's goodness unlocks the result that clear and distinct perceptions can be trusted. And so, you know, the 5 senses and our reasoning, when it's very clear and very sharp, we should trust it because God exists and we can trust him. And since God exists, he provides that our perceptions, when they're clear, must be true. But this is a kind of weird route back to everyday common sense because it passes through the idea that we must believe in God. According to Descartes, if we did not believe in God, then we would permanently remain doubtful of everything. Because if there's nothing that can assure us that what seems true really is true, then we're just left with the doubts. So from Descartes' perspective, the belief in God is actually very important for allowing you to have some sense of reliability in the accuracy of what you think you're believing. A lot of people have criticized that element of his argument. And, you know, there are other writers who've said there's no need to assume the existence of God to assume that we can get the knowledge that we think we have about the external world around us. So there's just another idea that he's presented here, and it's very interesting. It's a famous, you know, philosopher, the Meditations, I think, therefore I am. That's right there at the core of some important philosophical work. Now, you know, you're a part of the generations, the ages, because you've inherited these ideas that have been passed down to me and now on down to you, and they're not going anywhere, right? Something classic and something important has been written about in these books. As weird as the ideas may be, and as you know, as strange as the thoughts may be, It's not like something can survive for this long in our culture and be taught in the university to so many young minds without retaining some element of importance. So I think it is kind of a cool thing to be able to teach it and to learn about it a little bit. So don't misunderstand Descartes and come away from this lecture being like, wow, so the guy just says nothing's real and we're dreaming. I mean, he uses the method of doubt to force us to articulate what it is that we cannot doubt. And once he gets it, then he uses it as leverage to build up knowledge of other things that at least initially seemed more doubtful. Okay? So I guess in a way that kind of closes off now our latest topic in the class, which was all about knowledge. When we come back next week, we'll get started on another new topic, which is time. We're going to talk about time and the physical and scientific and philosophical understanding of time. So we'll read the work of Einstein, and we'll see how the theory of relativity gives us a way different thinking about time and space than what existed previously under Isaac Newton's laws of physics. And that's very fascinating. It really brings together science and philosophy in a way that I think, at least to me, who definitely values both fields, I think it's kind of a cool thing to see them kind of unified in a way. I'll be finished with the midterms over the weekend also. I know that you're waiting on those, but my normal window is 2 weeks or no later than 2 weeks. So certainly prior to Tuesday, I think I'll be done with them on Saturday morning or something. And then people will be able to check on any of the grades by sending me a message. So also, we got a big election on Tuesday. We're gonna be in this meeting on Tuesday. I'm quite interested in watching the election returns, but duty calls. So I guess we'll have our meeting. But I would love it if you guys are able to vote. It's an important election, so see if you can. All right, guys. Well, that's it, I guess, for now. Thanks, everybody. And to anyone not watching live, I understand it's 5:30 to 6:45, and that's not like maybe prime time for everybody to attend, but it matters that you attend. Your performance will be better if you do. I don't want to induce people to do things that are in their own best interests, but it is in your best interest to come. So, I mean, that should be reason enough. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day and a great weekend, and I'll be in touch, okay? Thank you. Am I going to watch The Mandalorian tonight? Oh, yeah. I don't think I'll be able to get it in tonight. I have some plans later, but maybe this weekend if I can. Okay, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.